Welcome back, everybody. The rudder's done. It was a lot of work still. It came out really well. Just like the elevators and the horizontal stab, it does need a little bit of tweaking, but that's stuff that'll probably happen during final paint unless I get froggy while I'm doing the vertical stab and I've got it on here. But we'll see. So that means up next is the vertical stab. I've got the fairing that needs to go on the top of it. I have the foam pieces that need to go in. I also need to install the doubler plate I made, as well as the stuff for the USB. So this one will be a little more involved, at least on the technical side, not just fiberglass, thankfully. But there will still be some fiberglass work. Hopefully it won't be too bad. It's just a small little fairing. Fingers crossed. I'm really sick of fiberglass right now. And obviously this is all just a baby precursor of what's to come later on, because there's the whole skirt around the canopy that's fiberglass that has to get done. There's the cowl. This is why I built a metal airplane. It looks good. I mean, it looks really good. I'm not going to tell Vans that. Okay, fine. Let's get back to the fiberglass work. All right, welcome to the voiceover part. This was not as bad as all of the other stuff. All told, the fiberglass work has a little over 3, maybe 4 hours of work on this vertical stab. It really wasn't too terribly bad. The fairing itself went pretty well. Probably spent more time just fighting with getting this rudder alignment issues sorted, so I'll talk about that for a second. First, I'd like to say, semi-pro tip, when installing the rudders for fitment, or the rudder for fitment, or the elevators for fitment, it is definitely easier if you can put them in a fixture like that and have them vertical, because then gravity helps you. If you have them flat on the table, it takes at least 2 people and you fight yourself, and it's a real pain. So install them like that, makes life easier, then lay them down if you have to check fitment on things. Next, I noticed right away, and I wasn't 100% sure why, the bottom of the counterbalance on the rudder was a lot closer towards the very front edge of the vertical stab than it was towards the back, like it was at an angle. It took me a while to think about it, and finally I reasoned that the hinges must need adjusting. Well, I had them set exactly to the dimensions that's called out on the plans, but it turns out, after going online and reading about other people that had hinge alignment issues with the rudder, there's a lot of movement in that rear spar on the vertical stab. You can see that whole lower portion doesn't have any real support right now. So you really can't adjust this thing or even assume that it's straight or true until it's actually attached to the fuselage later, because that thing has enough bend in it that it throws everything out of alignment. It took me a while to figure that out. So that is going to preclude me from doing any real final fitment issues as far as the fiberglass work goes to that, because if I make it perfect now, it's not going to be perfect when it's on the airplane later on. So right now it is just installed and good enough, and we'll get to that again later on once we have a fuselage to attach it to. Anyhow, catching back up. I initially had it on there just to check to see how much room I had, if I needed to trim that forward fairing at all. Like I did for the horizontal stab. I do not. In fact, it probably need to fill that gap out more later on, but again, I won't know until I get this on the fuselage, because the gap between the aft end of this and the forward end of the counterbalance is pretty big right now. It's probably close to 1/4 inch. So I didn't need to trim anything off of that cap. And now I've got it drilled into place and clecoed to the vertical stab, and I am now marking and drilling out where that USB port is going to go, which is right above where the camera mounts at. I put it as far aft as I could so that I had room for the back side of it because this thing is kind of deep. There you go. And I wanted to have room to be able to get the USB cable on it. I did buy a cable that had a 90-degree end on it, which makes it perfect for going into the back of that. And you'll see that here in just a few minutes as well. So this particular USB plug is a really low profile one. I wanted that for the tail just because it sticks out less. It'll be less noticeable and obtrusive. It's not as weather tight probably as the other style that I have. It has the big screw-on cap, but I didn't want something that big up on the tail. Semantics, but I think it'll look better. I do have a little tiny plug that goes inside of the port, which should do well enough. Plus these ports are going to be turned off by a switch in the cockpit unless I have a camera plugged in and am actually using it. So for the most part, it'll just be a dead plug. So even if it got a little wet, it won't be the end of the world. Holding it in are two number 632 nut plates. And just like I did with the wingtips, I am using some micro and resin to secure those in place. I have the screws lightly threaded in, and I use the screw to just put some tension on it to pull the nut plate down into the resin and make sure that they stay straight. So while that's curing, my newest shipment of conduit, because I need a run to go up through the tail. I don't want wires or cables flopping around through there, and if I ever have to replace it, having conduit to run it through will make sure that I can easily get a cable back up in there. So there's one of my conduit clips to hold the bottom, and we're going to use a modified version for the top. Now that hole in the top is going to go through a doubler plate that I made. You saw that in one of the previous videos or the short that I did. And then that whole thing is going to get pro sealed and held in place with 4 pulled rivets. There's the other conduit clamp. I just cut one of the ears off of this one because it wouldn't fit the standard way. And then to make sure that it stays pretty well locked onto the conduit, because there's a little rib inside of it that grips the conduit. So I'm not really worried about it letting go. But just to make sure, I also smeared some Pro Seal around it and the conduit, pretty much locking that whole thing in place. So there's the Pro Seal. If you've worked with it, I guarantee that you can smell this video at this point. The conduit's naturally coiled up and it wants to go back to that state. So to keep it straight and make it easy to run through here, I just stuck it on that fiberglass rod I use for pulling the wires through the wings, and use that to fish it through. So Pro Seal's on, doubler plate is on. I installed 3 out of the 4 rivets. The 4th one is going to go through that conduit clamp as well and hold that all in place. There you go, last one in. So now the conduit is installed. And I'm just smearing Pro Seal around the rest of it, like I said, to keep everything secured and locked in place. Now I need to attach the bottom one. From other pictures and videos of builds I've seen, there should be plenty of room for this. Once it's attached to the fuselage, this will all just kind of hide under the empennage fairing. So I should have good access to it still. There will be a power supply for that USB that'll get mounted back there at a later date on the fuselage. You will get to see that. I have another video that'll be coming out probably next week that shows me installing that power supply and plug in the left wingtip. I have already done it. I've just got to put the video together and do a few more little things. So, but you'll get a chance to see that. And I'm working on possibly a aerodynamic fairing to go around the USB plug, the bigger one. And I'm even kicking around the idea of possibly putting this all together as a kit for anybody that might be interested in buying the whole USB power supply, plug, fairing, and everything as one kit to install from one place. But we'll see. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. All right, so now it's back to fiberglass work. Get everything all scuffed up so everything has a good chance to adhere, get it all cleaned off. And then the first round, like always, is going to be mixing up some resin and some micro. And the goal here is not to completely make that line disappear. I mean, as much as it does, that'll be great. But just get it to blend in as tightly as possible. Which means since the fairing lives inside of the skin, most of this resin should end up on the fairing itself, not the skin. The only thing on the skin really is going to be going over those pulled rivets, just kind of filling them in and make those a little bit disappear. Now, the tricky part is because of where I put the USB plug, I can only go so high up or I'm going to start covering up the holes for it. Maybe I should have done this first and then drilled the hole for it, but in the end it worked out. There's a little tiny ridge underneath it I need to fill a little more and get rid of, but that's just part of the final tweaking of things. So first round's on, and now it's on to sanding. And yes, I will cut out a lot of it so you don't have to sit through as much of it as I did. Not as bad as everything else so far. This was a good way to finish this up because I'm definitely tired of sanding and I'm tired of all of the fiberglass work. I know you've heard me complain about that before, but it's all I got right now. In other news, while Tim is sanding away, I have acquired the remaining items I needed as well as tickets for Oshkosh. So that is officially happening for me this year. I even bought some personal merch for the channel to wear while I'm up there. So if you see me, the droves of you that are subscribed to the channel, by all means, stop and say hi. And it'll be a fun time. I'm looking forward to the air show part of it, as well as all the vendors, and learning as much as I can and getting my hands on some of the other products before I need to start ordering some other stuff as I can. So good times. Looking forward to getting up to Osh this year. All right, first round of sanding is over. I have decided the best way to go is definitely do the initial round with micro and resin, and then come back with a thin layer of the Z-Grip body filler to get what's left for the second round. And that's all I did to this, was just 2 rounds. It probably does need a third. It's kind of hard to tell till you get paint on it. So a lot of this stuff is gonna get gone over again, just not to the serious extent that it had to go through on this time. Time to fish the cable through. So here's the USB cable I bought. I got a much longer one than I needed. I bought a 10-foot one because I wasn't sure where I really wanted to put the power supply. I don't know if I'm going to keep it that way or if I'm going to go to a shorter one and put the power supply back in the tail, or if I'll have the power supply more up front. We'll figure that out when we get to a fuselage. But for now, I just wanted to get something in there and hooked up so I could test it. And if I need to change it, it'll be easy enough to change. Plus, you see I've got a pull string there. I'm running through there at the same time, and I tied that off to the end of the cable, so hopefully I have an easy way to run a new cable if I have to. Always thinking ahead. I mean, at some point you got to work on this plane. Right there you saw I was actually testing that little buck converter I bought, which as of now lives in the left wing. That's the same one I'm going to use to power everything else. It seems to work really well. It's got a really good current rating for it, so it should be more than strong enough for anything I'm going to plug into these outlets. It seems to not be noisy at all. It's got a nice sturdy aluminum construction, which should also help with heat dissipation. Yeah, I just realized the camera angle's wrong, so you can't see it, but hang on, I'll fix it. There we go. Doesn't look too bad. And if I paint those screws to match the black later on, then they'll kind of disappear up there and you probably won't notice that thing there at all. That's what it looks inside with the cable plugged into it. So I still had a lot of room to work with. And there's the bottom end of it, cable attached and coiled up. Also, didn't do it on camera, but there is the oval-shaped hole and grommet that I bought to put in the lower portion of the rudder, which is where the cable for the tail light is going to pass through later on in life. So get the vert stab upright and clamped to the table. And now, just like you've seen me do countless times before, going to fill the last 2 voids with foam and resin. So first you just kind of smack that foam down on there and it'll make a nice little indent, shows you where you need to cut. And honestly, the bandsaw is probably the easiest thing to cut this to the final shape with. Get some flocks and resin put in there. You see the front end of that, I left kind of a little step in the foam. That's just to help fill the bottom edge of that space where the front piece has to go. I mean, could have done it one way or the other. I could have done it with the other piece of foam, but this way I figured if it made a nice L right there, I wouldn't have to worry about resin disappearing into the void later on as I was trying to fill it. So bottom's done. Now time to work on that end piece. And originally, you see, I've got the rudder reattached, and I did that because I knew I had a big gap to deal with, and I still hadn't quite figured out that I was dealing with a flexible spar, which you can see the whole thing moving, and that's because of that flex. Thankfully, I figured it out before I decided to stick that out any further than it needed to be. So I mostly just kind of made it flush, and I figure if I have to build it up later, it'll be easy enough to do. Sorry the rudder got in the way there, but you've seen this before. The foam is cut. It's now slathered up with flocks and resin and put into its space. I also made sure it was thin enough so that no part of it would end up coming into contact with that USB plug. It would suck to go to all that trouble to make it removable, only to resin it in and have it be a permanent part of the rudder now. So first round was done. On to the micro and resin for the fine tuning. It is better if you can put that stuff on a horizontal surface, but I found out if you mix it thick enough, you can do vertical surfaces too. So just like everything else here, power went out again. Didn't stop me from doing some sanding, although the power going out on the camera did. But just like movie magic, we come back later, power's on, camera's got battery power again, and more sanding, which again, I'm not going to make you suffer through. Lots and lots of sanding. These are at least easy to sand because they're just flat. No contour to deal with. Time to pull the plug out. I'm going to wrap some tape around the cord so it doesn't disappear on me. And we're just going to get some of that primer sealer on everything and see how it looks. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to get this painted, and then I'll put the rudder back on momentarily to get some final pictures, and I'll throw that up here at the end. Again, the next video is going to be the USB power for the left wing, and then after that, I'm not sure what. It'll just be a bunch of little stuff because I'm pretty much officially out of things I can do until that fuselage shows up. Thankfully, I got another work trip and a vacation coming up, so that'll be it. Comments and questions below, like and subscribe if you're enjoying this, and I will see you all on the next one.